Welcome to Coffee Talks, a Pokemon card collecting podcast with Dan Norton and David Persin.
Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Coffee Talks once again with myself and David. David, how are things going with you?
Dan, I just can't believe you'd even ask me that. It's just such a kind, considerate move to ask how someone's doing when you're about to inject a need of about an hour and a half of their time on a Sunday morning when they've got so many other better things to do. Dan, it's just great. Thanks, buddy. Things are going wonderful.
I'm a very kind and considerate person. I'm glad you noticed.
A lot of people have said so. The people that have tried to stop you at Worlds and stuff and you won't talk to them, not so much those people, but the rest of the people think you're absolutely a gem.
Well, no one said it to me, but I'll trust you.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, not too much to talk about really to start off with this week. Not too much to catch up on. Anything you want to mention? Yeah,
just a couple things, Dan.
Okay.
First of all, I want to say about last week's podcast. First of all, you're supposed to do the good before you do the bad, right? So let me do the good.
All right.
The good, Dan, is thank you so much for your efforts, your hard work, you and Laura. The videos are looking great. The podcast, we got them in segments now. You got some music there. You got wonderful images. People are really missing. If you're listening, I hope you guys can watch as well. The images that they're putting in the segments alongside of what we're discussing are just tremendous, colorful, beautiful, makes it all that much more of a holistic experience. The regularity of the videos, much more regular than my stomach. So Dan, I just want to thank you for all your efforts. It's going great. And then with that, before I allow you to say you're welcome, I do want to say, Dan, what happened last week? Let's just talk about it for a quick sec. You got all kinds of internet issues. The dogs are chewing through your cords and stuff. The wind is blowing. You got to reset the router 52 times.
Yeah.
And Dan, in the end, when it comes to fixing the video so everybody was watching it, you got a picture of me ranting. Couldn't you pick a picture of yourself looking foolish for all those times when the video wasn't going no more?
Well, my video was luckily there for the whole thing. Your video, I lost. I think it was about 40 seconds over the entire 90-minute video.
But you losing that video was my fault, right, Dan? It was my fault, I have my bad picture on there?
No, it wasn't your fault. It was my internet's fault. It was just that's where the video yours was the bit of the video that was lost, so I needed a picture of you.
Why don't you put Sir Elton John in there or something, but he's not raising his hand in a fist-enraged rage? I mean, figure it out, Dan. Don't punish me for your internet. It's just wrong. Do you ever go to school or anything, bud?
No, I don't go to school. I haven't gone to school in a long time.
Go to school, social graces school, or etiquette or anything. Forget it, Dan. Just go move on. Let's get past this intro stuff already. I'm already too upset. I might start my rant early.
I'll put pictures of Elton over you throughout this podcast. Then
okay, perfect. Thanks, Dan.
Let's take a look at your comments.
Okay, so your comments from last week. We're starting off with Craig, one of our regular commenters, said, "You're correct, I am from the UK. I know this will mean nothing to Dave, but Dan might know it. I'm from a town in Lincolnshire called Grimsby. Craig, I am so sorry." He says it often appears on lists of the worst places to live in the UK. Yeah, I can believe that. I'm very sorry to hear that you live in Grimsby, Craig.
Is that all he said?
That's all he said.
Well, let me add to his comments then. Craig Holmes is our resident Pokemon character expert, right? And so this week he feels obligated as always. He says, "I feel like I have to keep these up each week now, haha." So he talks about Abra, the character we picked last week for our giveaway. And he says, Abra sleeps for 18 hours a day. However, it can sense the presence of foes even while it is sleeping. So in such a situation, the Pokemon immediately teleports to safety. So again, we appreciate the knowledge. It's important to know. I relate to, Abra very much because I sleep for less hours a day, but in the middle of the sleep, when I'm dreaming every night, I do tend to flash and slash and flail out and stuff due to problems with dreams where I think I need to get my own safety there. So I don't teleport. I just beat the heck out of them in my sleep. Sometimes my wife gets the brunt of it if she's laying too close to me next to me in the bed.
I was going to say it did remind me of Laura because she sleeps about 18 hours a day, but she has no awareness of anything while she's asleep. She's dead to the world.
I bet she sleeps better after she finishes her chicken nuggets.
Oh, that's coming up later in comments, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right, next comment is Steve Jackson says, "Dave is a legend. Never enough Dave rants." Well, I'm sure there'll be one later today.
And I will say about Steve Jackson, he received his prize. He won a giveaway. He received the prize. I sent it for the first time ever non-tracked across this world to Canada. That's not the world. It's kind of in a neighboring country. But he actually got it. He was excited, and I was excited for him. And I learned something in the process as well.
Nice. I think Craig actually received his as well. I think we got a nice tag on Instagram. Craig posted a picture of what he received for his prize.
I don't even think I sent anything to Craig. I don't think he's one of them. That was somebody else, but you pulled a me. Dan, you pulled a me. Don't worry about it. It's okay.
I'm gonna check the Instagram. Who tagged us?
I know who that was. That's the gentleman down in Florida. And Craig's in the UK and Lincolnshire and Grimsby.
Is it CyberX Collections or someone? Is it?
Yeah, it could have been. Sure, Alex. I think it's Alex. That was Alex. Yeah.
Like, why is it not loading? I've got my Wi-Fi. I've got airplane mode on because I'm filming a podcast.
Well, that's fine. I guess when things go bad right now, we'll see one of the dogs or possibly Laura enjoying her nuggets.
Oh, well, I'll get rid of all of this. Oh, it was CyberX Collections. Yeah, I'll re-record that bit. I know a CyberX Collection.
Don't re-record anything. That's the fun of the podcast. Because if I rub off on you, people will realize how much more relatable you are, and you're not just some Pokemon historian, and that's all you know. We need to know you're a human being as well, Dan. We do see the hair grows very rapidly on the face, apparently. But other than that, are you really human, or are you just a bot?
At least let me correct it, and I'll say CyberX Collection posted a picture that of what they received from their giveaway. Sorry, Craig, I mixed up a couple of people there.
It's no problem. You know, good things don't happen to people that come from Grimsby. Grimsby?
Yeah, Grimsby. And yeah.
Okay, yeah. He's bound. I've already figured out just by nature of where he lives, he's never going to win the thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, next comment. Let's carry on with these comments. We have one from Christopher said, I'm definitely a fan of the reverses. I don't go out of my way to collect them all, but I do enjoy them and like the look. Yeah, we discussed Secret Wonders specifically last week, but kind of we put in some discussion about the reverses of the Diamond and Pearl series as a whole, really. That nice mirror foil that exists for a few eras.
And they're very catchy. You know, again, in spending more time with the collections these days, they really are catchy. I didn't really realize, because I sort of think as every reverse as, you know, the same. But you know, as you know, Dan, because you actually look at your collection once in a while, they're very, very different, and they really stand out. So,
yeah, they are very nice cards. Next, we have Gerald says, great and informative video as always. Thank you, Gerald. Glad you are enjoying.
Brief and to the point, man. I wish I could be. Thank you, Joe.
Then TCG Cross Collector says, super rant, never too old. That references your rant from last week.
Yeah, and when he says never too old, I really appreciate the sentiment. But really, if you are too old, like your age is dead, you're probably just a little too old.
Potentially. I don't know if that counts as an age, though, as dead. You can
be
dead at any age.
You know, it's a new world. Everything counts these days. You can't get away from it.
All right. Pokey Power Up says, great ending with those half-art trophies. Never get tired of seeing them. Yes, I also never get tired of seeing them. I enjoy looking at them in my collection very, very often. Those are some of the cards where occasionally I've thought, do I need to start getting, you know, a bank safety deposit box for these cards? Because those 4 cards are worth so much more than anything else in my collection. There's a huge gap between them. And it just got to the point where I was thinking, no, because I wouldn't be able to look at them that often. Once, you know, if I have the cards when they're just in a safety deposit box somewhere, what's the point in owning them? At that point, if I'm just looking at a picture, do I even need to keep owning the card? Should I just be selling the cards and paying off my mortgage at that point? Which is why I've decided to just keep them here at all times. Safely locked up. They're not just out and about all the time, but they're in a place where I can at least go and look at them when I want to.
Well, and Dan, I'm not going to let you re-record that entire piece just for the fun of the podcast, but I am going to say this. I'm going to re-record it for you right now. So let me do it as if I were Dan, okay? You know, one of the things about having these half-art trophy cards is they're just wonderful and they're beautiful, and I love to have them, and I enjoy looking at them, and they're very much more special piece of my my collection. I don't get to look at them as much as I want, being that they're away in a safe safety deposit box that's not where I live and not where people would ever come and figure out that they might have them. But it's okay because I spend so much of the rest of my time filling my collection with cards that I need in the other set. So, you know, it's not like it's from a fantasy perspective. I wish I could sit and glare at them all day long, but I've got so much else with my collections to do. And then every once in a while on a special occasion, I will go there and we'll pull them out and we'll just kind of have a day. We look at our most valuable cards after we pull them from the vaults that aren't located at our home in Columbus, Ohio. And so
Wow.
I just want to say, it's just, that's all it is. So I'm really happy to have the cards, and Laura doesn't have them, and they're safely tucked away. So don't bother coming near me. I have cards.
People can find my house. They'll never find the cards within the house.
That's fine. It doesn't matter. And you've also got the pit bulls there to take care of it, or also one pit bull and one very small dog that rides on his back. But I know he's not a pit bull, Dan, but we got to put, I might call you Donna. I'm so upset with this whole segment, but we got to make sure people you got to be safe. Stay safe, Dan.
Yeah. All right. The next comment is from a load of random numbers, which I happen to know is Laura. Says, have to say I agree with Dave here on reverse hollows. They're good-looking cards, and I think too many people just ignore them. I don't remember Dan asking if he could tell people if he gave me Harvey's chicken nuggets. I didn't. I just put it in. But I think it's pretty obvious to people that sometimes I eat chicken nuggets, but she put chicky nuggies because she's a child. Says, Dan, maybe you should be a little clearer about the Pikachu promo and the rest of those 3 to 6 cards that David might not have. David, do you want to say anything you have to say about that comment, and then I'll give a little bit more information about those promos?
Dan, have we ever talked about the key to a successful relationship being one of the keys or one of the benefits or one of the things they say keeps a relationship together is baby talk? Have we done that on the podcast yet?
No, for all of you relationship tips, I don't think we've discussed baby talk.
Okay, and I was going to do it with you, but you know what? I just don't want to. So, but the chicky nuggies part, that works out real well. And if she's doing that with you in person, you have a relationship that's going to last. I didn't make that up, by the way. I actually read every day extensively on this stuff because I got nothing better to do when I'm not collecting my Pokemon cards.
Okay, well then, if baby talk is the sign of a healthy relationship, we have the healthiest relationship you could possibly imagine.
Yes, which I heard, and I'm glad to hear. I love you guys to death, and I just want you to stay together forever.
I'm sure we will. We're separating the collections out at this point. Even though we collect separately, just physically separating, there would be too much work.
I'll do the forensic accounting. I can be your mediator, arbitrator, and everything else you need if anything does go wrong.
There you go. So the Pikachu promo that you mentioned was the one that I chose as my look what I found for last week, which was technically Laura's, and I just stole it to show it off.
Yes, the one that devastated me and made me not want to do this podcast with you anymore. I remember it. Mm-hmm.
We're going to get you one, don't worry. And we'll get me one as well.
Fair enough.
So, she mentioned the 3 to 6 cards. So, there was 6 promos released at the Play Lab at Worlds last year. It was 6 cards which had that, the stamp on it that comes in the Play Pokemon packs, but they're not from the Play Pokemon packs. So, there was 3 which were reverse hollows, which had that symbol. It was Grookey, Scorbunny, and Sobble from the Sword and Shield base set. And then there were 3 Cosmos foils, which is Pikachu, Dreadnought, and Alcremie. I think 2 of them are from Sword and Shield base, and 1 is from Rebel Clash, but I'll put pictures on the screen, you'll be able to see them. So to get the Grookey, Sobble, or Scorbunny, you had to just go through and do something at the Play Lab. You would do something where you got, those... You may have seen the 30-card decks, David. They're like the Play Lab promo decks. They have a non-holo V and stuff like that in them. Those you can get pretty much anywhere now. They've done a lot of events with those. But going through and getting one of those at Worlds, you would get one of those 3 starter Pokemon. Those 3 are a lot more common than the Cosmos foil ones. I do already have 2 of those for you. I need to get you the 3rd one when they next come back. The Cosmos foils were then for what's called raid battles. So a raid battle, it's a thing in Pokemon Go. You all join up and you fight a Pokemon together, but they did that in the TCG. So you have like a jumbo card. You can play these on your own at home with whatever jumbo cards you have. I'm sure you have a load of them, David, where, some of the jumbo cards have a lot of HP, like the Shadow Lugia or the Zoroark and stuff. Things like that, they have more HP than the standard Pokemon. So you put those in the middle, and then it's a number of players work together, and they all fight against the jumbo card, basically. There's a lot more rules to it, but they did 3 special jumbo cards for Worlds of Pikachu, Alcremie, Dreadnought. Don't worry, I will try and get you a set of those at some point as well. Neither me nor Laura own a set of those jumbos. We physically have a set, but they belong to League. I've been told that anytime I mention those jumbos, I have to clarify that the set we have here does not belong to us, because you'll be seeing some pictures of it, but they belong to our Pokemon League. We've not stolen those for ourselves. That has to be made very, very clear, or we will be in a lot of trouble. Anyway, you fought against those, and if you...
And just
Yep.
one sec. I know you haven't stolen them, but now that anybody knows where you live, here's what I'm thinking. They may inadvertently be stolen from you, Dan. Listen,
Yeah.
and they might disappear, Dan, and then they might never reappear, but only to appear many, many years from now in a special collection. Just keep it in
Yeah.
mind. There's a price, Dan. There's some.
I'll,
Dan.
I will figure it out for you. I will get
Okay,
you a
thanks, man.
set at some
Thanks,
point.
Dan. I appreciate it. Okay.
Anyway, if the players work together and they beat those jumbo cards, they would get a Cosmos foil of whichever of the 3 Pokemon they fought against. And those ones were a lot rarer. There were a lot less of them given out. And to actually play through the Play Lab and get them, you had to have, a group of 3 people to sit down and play through. And the Pikachu ones actually all ran out. Those were the only ones of the 6 promos that ran out during the weekend. The only way Laura got hers is as they were clearing up, they were giving out extra copies to the staff that worked there. Anyone saying, "Oh, do you want a set of these 5, whatever?" And Laura noticed there was one of the Pikachus still in their display case, their like demo case, and said, "Hey, can I take that one too?" And she managed to get the one Pikachu for herself. But we have been told that there's a good chance these are coming to Pokemon League, so they shouldn't be that rare for too much longer.
I hope you're right, Dan. And I know that if I were Laura, and that was a great idea, and being so resourceful to see that Pikachu card just alone sitting there and ask for it, you don't get the order unless you ask for it. But Dan, I will say that if I'm Laura, I've got several disguises lined up, and I'm going back through that staff line so many times to try to pick up cards because I don't want to do it unethically. But if they don't know it's me, then I can't really be, deemed unethical. I'm just going to be deemed as a few staff people that other people don't really know.
Yeah, that big badge that they check that has a full name printed on it might have caused a little bit of issues with that one.
Well, I know someone I can get badges printed for you, so don't worry about it. I can get some other people.
Then maybe you should have come to Worlds last year, and maybe we could have gone through the Play Lab with fake mustaches on.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Good advice. We'll see.
I mean, there might be a Play Lab this year. We don't know. But either way, the card should hopefully be coming to leagues and stuff soon.
Okay.
I'm just happy she got at least one so I could show them off on a video, and just so that we can at least show people what they look like and we know what we're looking for.
Sure, that makes sense, Dan. They can all chase it now and try to get it before I can because you've shown the whole world what it is and I don't have it. Makes a lot of sense, Dan. This is a great podcast. I'm enjoying it so much.
Hey, I had someone this week offer me $300 just for that Pikachu.
Yeah, great. So who cares? Money doesn't buy anything from the two of you, except, McDonald's, fries, and all the rest of it. I don't know what, it doesn't matter. So just, Dan, get on with the comments, man. I'm getting more frustrated.
All right, the last couple of comments are both from M Thirsty. It says, first of all, Dave, every single Pokemon collector nowadays is saying that they want to collect till they've got grandchildren and leave it to them. Don't listen to any of that old guy stuff. They're hypocrites. I wish I had people in my family as cool as you. Then followed up with, I love mirror reverse foils. My favorite set is Expedition, which I have a complete set with reverse hollows, although Diamond and Pearl era reverse hollows always seem to shine a little brighter and scratch a little more.
Yeah, really, really cool comment. I've dealt with them Thirsty for, years and years. So I'm just the name, for even when I used to be on social media. So really kind comments. I appreciate it. The cool part is great, but if you met my kids and grandkids, you'd understand. Yeah, it's not going to work for me, but I love the idea and the thought, and thank you for the encouragement as I rapidly decline in my older years.
Great upbeat way to continue with the podcast. All right, that's the end of the comments. Do you have any additional comments? I know sometimes you do from other places.
Of course I do, Dan, and I'm sorry for that. But I want to say, first of all, my friend, somebody that watches and reached out, Rosario Razzarelli, sent me a video and shared his collection. It was really cool. He collects all of just the hollows from the first sets all the way through like the legendary or something. So I got to see a video of all those cards put in the binders and was really cool. And also I got to see a separate video. He's got a ton of like base set Charizards. Just again, looking at different things and how different people collect, really interesting to me. Feel free to share your collections with me on Instagram at dperson1. I do love to see him. I really enjoy it. So, and I enjoy the interaction with all of you. I heard from another collector that looks like really has a beautiful collection. His name was David Kim. I think he goes by Pika Zard Collector. Okay. It's just it's incredible when you look at what he's got going on. Just how many amazing collections are out there. everybody owes, oh, Dave, you got a collection? I got nothing. I got, a few things in a few boxes, whatever. But it's really neat to see how different and varying these different collections are and how meaningful they are to the people that are collecting them. But it was nice because David looks like much larger influencer than I am. I don't influence anybody. I can't even influence the gardener to cut my grass. So it was just nice to see that collection and a response from someone like David. And I even heard from Jack Meeker, who we know as Shadowless Jack, and he won last week, and he was kind enough to tell me a little bit about his life. He's got I think a 2-year-old daughter and another one on the way in September. And I got to see the new house that they bought because they needed to upsize for the situation. So I don't blame him. Jack, if you've got to sell a few cards to help pay for that house and the new payments, do what you got to do, buddy. Growing family is beautiful, and congratulations. Yeah. And then I think that's it, Dan. That's all I got for today. I don't want to, let's just move right. Keep it rolling, Dan.
All right, cool. Well, that's the end of the comments.
So, who won last week's giveaway?
All right, so do you have the results of who won your giveaway for this week?
Yes, I do, Dan. Amazingly, I ran the random number generator as I do every week, and I think that we'll be surprised and happy to tell you that TCG Cross Collector was the winner this week. He is also, I guess his industry name, because when you're really big, you have like an industry moniker. His name is Cross, and then also, but I think his real name is Jacinto, which means he's probably in some place across the entire world. I got to figure out how to send a card there. Yeah. So I want you to know, Cross, Jacinto, whatever you want to be called today, congratulations. You deserved it. You spent an hour and a half watching one of our videos. God, did you deserve it. And after having said that, let me say this. If you are across the world somewhere, there is a significant chance that I will send your card, but you'll never receive it. If for some reason you do receive it, let me know you received it. I will say, Dan, just say something else at this point, and then I'll interject my final thought here.
About the giveaways? Well,
yes, please.
To let people know, we're going to take a little bit of a break on the giveaways just because I'm going to Worlds pretty soon. After this episode, we'll have one more episode we're recording live, basically, and then the next couple of weeks after that will be kind of pre-recorded episodes, or we may be just skipping a week so that I can put up some Worlds content. We're not 100% sure on that. But either way, there's going to be a few weeks without the giveaway just while I'm away at Worlds, and then we'll hopefully be getting the giveaways and stuff resumed once I'm back. We're just making it so that we're not stuck trying to figure that out while we're also having one of us away and the episodes coming out of filming order, basically.
Yeah, and two final thoughts about that, just as I recap and we move on. I'll say, number one, as far as the giveaways go, I say this every podcast, not many people are participating, so your chances of winning are pretty good. So for those of us, there's only a few folks that I have not won that have been watching regularly. I know who you are. Wink, wink. Don't worry about it. So regardless of what happens with the giveaway. And number two is just to fill in this gap, because Dan wants to go to Worlds. He wants to just knock me off the podcast for the next several weeks or so. He's trying to find an easy way to tell me and let me down. And I'm like, what do I care, Dan? I'm like I can't find something better to do on a Sunday morning. So what I did in the interim is I decided to give myself something. And friends and family are not eligible, as you guys know, for the giveaways, but they're eligible when I spend my own money and buy whatever I want. So take a look at my shirt. What do you guys think of my shirt? Come on, let's look at it. I got a little Psyduck on this arm, and I got a Pikachu, and I got some different type of summer stuff over here. And where did I buy it from? My least favorite spot in the entire world. Yes, I bought it from the Pokemon Center. And it just caught my eye. It's a beautiful little teal blue shirt, and I just needed to have it because you guys can't watch me just always do the podcast and non-Pokemon stuff. It just doesn't seem authentic, does it? So that's my giveaway. I gave it to myself, and we'll resume the giveaways down the road a bit. Thank you.
All right.
It's time to play Trainer Deck A or Trainer Deck B.
All right, time for that section again. Trainer Deck A or Trainer Deck B, where David is just going to ask me some either-or questions, probably after over-explaining some rules for about 5 minutes.
You know what? How do you know me so well? Sometimes I think you're like my work wife. You know me better than my home wife. Yeah. Dan, let me tell you about this. When I put these things together, and I only do it for like 3 or 4 minutes. I can't spend too much time on this stuff because it's not worth it, Dan. It's just nonsense. But let's explain the rules real quick. I'm going to give you an either-or answer, just like Trainer Deck A or Trainer Deck B. You could pick one. You do pick a selection, Dan, and then you give me a rationale for choosing what you chose. You don't have to give me an explanation, but should you choose to give me an explanation, you have 10 seconds to do it. And if you don't get this all done within that 10-second allotment of time, a Pokemon judge will magically appear and probably disqualify you from one of many things in your life going forward. Are you ready to go, Dan?
Yep, I am ready to go.
All right. Dan, Scarlet or Violet?
Violet, I think, is the one I'll be wanting to play when I play. I play whichever one Laura doesn't want to play, which I think this time means I'd be playing Violet.
Well, it's nice that once again, Laura gets to determine everything in your life that you do. And at
Basically.
least I know she's talking a lot of baby talk when she does it. Dan, sun or moon?
I think Moon. I didn't actually play that one, but I think Laura played Sun because she wanted the lion, so I think I have Moon probably still unopened.
You know what's amazing is that you actually know what you did and didn't play, and that you didn't play much, but yet going back in the vintage years, you still know how to play the game, and you could talk a lot about the game playing aspects of the game and the gamers versus the collectors. So so it's good that you don't have a clue, but you still have things. Dan, X or Y?
I have no idea which one she played of those.
Why does it matter what she played? I'm asking you what you're selecting.
Because I didn't play either of them, so I just get the one that she didn't want. Probably X. They came out before I actually moved over, so those games I had, like, neither of them, no connection to them at all, I think, so I'll go X.
All right, Dan, check your X chromosome as well. Something could be wrong there. Dan, Diamond or Pearl?
Pearl. I definitely remember I borrowed that one from a friend. That's how I got back into Pokemon. Was a friend finished the main story but didn't want to grind the Pokedex, so lent me his copy of Pearl.
What you just said makes sense to no one except not me. Maybe everyone except me. He grinded the Pokédex and whatever. I mean, I'm going to tell you guys, I thought this segment was going to be 4 seconds, and this guy's rocking and rolling through it because it's more difficult than I thought for someone who has to figure out the Pokemon reason for all these selections. Dan, sword or shield?
Shield. Because Laura liked sword, I think.
Oh, man, I'll tell you. They say the key to a good relationship other than baby talk is being best friends. Not collection competitors, but you guys are working it out well. Yeah. Dan, Heart of Gold or Soul of Silver?
Heart Gold. That one I did buy and play myself. I enjoyed that one.
Congratulations, Dan. You've relieved everyone watching the podcast now, if there anybody still is. Dan, 27 or the square root of 81?
I'm trying to work out if those are the same number or not, but they're not. 27.
Dan, what is the square root of 81?
9.
And what is 9 times 3?
27.
Yeah, so essentially the same number, right, Dan? Good selection.
Sure.
Dan, hippopotamus? No, let me do that right. Hippopotas or Hippowdon?
Hippowdon. Because I know that you didn't pronounce the first one right, but I also don't think I'd pronounce it right either. But I think Hippowdon is right, so I'll go with that one.
Fair enough. And Dan, you know what? It's nice because there's no controversy. Everybody picks Hippowdon. Yeah. Dan, Roggenrola or Volcarona?
Volcarona. No reason on that one.
Yeah, I just waited to give you a chance just in case. We all know the answer to the next one, but I've got to ask it anyways. Dan, your choice or her choice?
Her choice.
If that was painfully clear, the entire podcast.
I get my choice once she's told me what my choice has to be.
Good.
She tells me what I need to pick, and then asks me to pick it.
You know what? They say, Dan, the key to a good relationship, other than baby talk and being best friends, is communication. Dan, so this podcast.
Let me tell you, the key to a good relationship is that door has a lock on it, so I can hide in here.
I've never done that before, except for once or twice when things are being thrown at a very high velocity. Dan, simple or complex?
Simple. It's just easier.
It doesn't matter. Just easier doesn't mean anything. Maybe the greatest fruits of your life come from the complicated things you have to sort through. Stop taking a simple way out, Dan. Dad, red or orange?
Red.
Red. Nice choice, Dan. Good, strong confirmation. Dan, Fuji or Macintosh?
Macintosh.
And that one was exactly the opposite of your choice of red. Just a questioning of the world and what am I doing here? Dan, do you know why I asked Fuji or Macintosh?
They're types of apples, right?
Good job, Dan. I don't know if Brits eat apples. I just want to make sure. Dan, incandescent or iridescent?
Iridescent, I guess.
I won't make you define it, Dan.
No.
Dan, categorically or systematically?
Systematically. We started so well with Pokemon questions this week, and now we're just in words you picked from the dictionary again.
It's fun to see the big folks fall from the pedestal.
Yeah.
Dan, blasphemy or bigamy?
Blasphemy.
And why that choice, Dan? I think everybody's curious about that.
Well, bigamy would be having multiple wives, right? And I don't want that. One's enough.
Ah, man.
Also,
nothing else to say.
we've discussed before that I'm not a religious person. So
I don't think you should be, Dan. I just want you to be comfortable in your own skin. Dan,
well, that's why I'm okay with blasphemy, because I'm not a religious person. Okay.
That's fine. You be okay with whatever you're okay with, and I'm okay with it too. As long as it's legal, we can be okay with it. Dan, censored or uncensored?
Censored. Because sometimes you say the names of people that you don't want in the podcast, and then I have to go through and censor them.
We are so opposite, and that's why people watch our podcast. Nobody watches our podcast, but once they find us and you get us out on Spotify and stuff, it really is the odd couple, because everything you pick, I pick exactly the opposite, and that's what makes us a perfect podcast couple.
Yeah.
Dan, driving on the right side of the road or driving on the left side of the road?
The right side of the road, because I'm used to that now.
Dan, I would like to ask you a follow-up question on that. Is it the case that when Americans, USA citizens go to UK and they're driving, I've heard they let them drive on the right side of the road because that's what they're most comfortable doing?
Obviously not. No, that would be horrific.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure, because they would just crash into everyone.
All right. It seems a bit dangerous. I'm probably not going to go there. And finally, Dan, you'll be happy to know, right. Gym Warriors or Gym Heroes?
Gym Heroes. We're going to talk about Gym Heroes in a moment. And yeah, we're done. We're done with Trainer Deck AOB. Thank God for that.
And now for our highlighted cards of the week.
So if you grasped by that last weird question, assuming you didn't just completely skip that section, and I wouldn't blame you if you did, today we're going to talk a bit about Gym Heroes, probably a bit about Gym Challenge as well, because they do kind of pair very nicely together as sets. You want to jump in with anything?
I'm just waiting with bated breath. I'm so excited I can't say a thing.
All right. So Gym Heroes and Gym Challenge were both WotC era sets. They were the last sets of just the Kanto era. Right after these two, we started seeing Johto Pokemon in the TCG. They introduced Owners Pokemon, where you'll see, Blaine's Moltres or Misty's Seadra, things like that. In Japan, the two sets were very, very evenly split. It was just the first four gym leaders, Brock, Misty, Lieutenant Surge, Erica in set 1, and Gym 2 had Koga, Sabrina, Blaine, and Giovanni. When they came to the rest of the world, they were a little bit more mixed up. My assumption is that it was to do with the balancing of the number of each type within a set. Because I think the Japanese Gym 1 had no psychic types at all, due to the fact that those first four gym leaders never used any psychic or poison type Pokemon. So a lot of Sabrina's stuff was brought forward to set 1 into Gym Heroes, and I think a couple of Blaine's cards as well to balance out the fire types. And then some of Misty's and Lieutenant Surge's stuff was pushed back to Gym Challenge. I actually think some of Brock's and Erica's was as well, just to balance out the sets.
I just have one question before you move on real quick. So you always talk about Kanto and then you talk about Johto, the movement from one era to another. What is that most... If I don't know anything about those things, the only thing I remember from the podcast, you said Kanto was like the Charizard and the Blastoise and the Venusaur. Is that right?
Yeah, Kanto is Generation 1, so Kanto is the original 151 Pokemon from the red, blue, and yellow games. Johto is where they moved to in Generation 2, so Gold, Silver, Crystal, and it's the next 100 Pokemon going from, who's the first one, Chikorita up to Celebi.
Okay, all right. That's what I didn't. I've never really understood those kind of labels for the group of Pokemon. So okay.
Well, the labels are for the areas that the games are based in. So if you're playing in Pokemon Red and Blue, you go to different towns, but the overall area is called Kanto. And then in Generation 2, Gold, Silver, Crystal, you're in a place called Johto. So the names that they're given are based on the actual locations that the games are set in.
Got it.
And so, obviously, after Gym Challenge, the next set was Neo Genesis, which is where we started seeing those Gold and Silver Pokemon.
Okay.
So, obviously, both of these sets came in First Edition and Unlimited. There's not too many extras for these sets, extras or variants. When we did Secret Wonders last week, there was an absolute ton of them. For Heroes, there's 2 variant cards. There's Misty Seadra, which you can get with a pre-release stamp, and Misty Psyduck, which you can get with the Golden W stamp, the WotC stamp that they did on. It was 7 Pokemon cards had the Golden WotC stamp, but there's a lot of other different card games had that same stamp on it. Then for Challenge, the only variant was a Brock's Vulpix that again came with that Golden W stamp. There were also 2 error cards within Gym Challenge, which affected every copy of First Edition and the majority of copies of Unlimited. It's very hard to find these 2 corrected. The first is a pretty famous one. It's the Blaine's Charizard. It has a fighting symbol on its text rather than a fire symbol. And then the other one is Rocket's Minefield Gym, which emits the number 2 in most printings. It just says put some damage counters on Pokemon. Doesn't tell you how many. So both of those cards are a lot more difficult to find in the corrected version.
I don't think I have either one, Dan, now that you mention those. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, I do. Okay.
Of course you do. One last thing to mention with Challenge, because I know we're going to be talking about just the concept of the owner's Pokemon. We're going to go through that a little bit more in detail. One owner's Pokemon was left out of Gym Challenge that was in the Japanese set, and it was a blank name Chansey. So for blank names, people probably think of the Pikachu, the birthday Pikachu, where the idea is you would write your own name on it. That one came out as a promo, I think between Heroes and Challenge. We actually got that as a promo outside of Japan. But Gym Challenge did have an extra blank name Pokemon, which was a Chansey, which to date, we've never seen anywhere outside of Japanese.
That is that would be such a neat card to see in English, and I know as far as the Happy Birthday Pikachu, they're so hard to find now, especially in good condition and actually mint condition, because Rusty at TCA Gaming owns every single one in the world.
They did dry up pretty quick a couple of years back, so if Rusty was buying them out, that makes sense.
Yes, and plus I've seen the binders. I mean, there's nothing like it. I think basically he sleeps at night on a bed made of just that card.
Well, Japan did get a few different versions of that card. We obviously only got the one artwork variant in English, but Japan got a few different variant arts of Birthday Pikachu, all of which do look quite nice. And Japan also got some other blank name owners Pokemon years later in the Play promo set. So there was a Mew, Celebi, and Jirachi. There may have been some more. I'll try and remember. There'll be pictures on the screen if there are. But those ones I know I have as well, because those were some cards that never got translated outside of Japanese as well.
Got it.
Since we're on the subject of the Birthday Pikachu in English, obviously in addition to the original printing that we got, which was the foil promo, there was a reprint recently in Celebrations as part of the Classic Collection, and there was also an English printing in the Pikachu World Collection. Pikachu World Collection was a binder of 9 Pikachu cards in different languages, all reprints of Pikachus from early promos, early sets. They have a golden Pikachu tail stamp as their kind of set symbol. But the English one selected was Birthday Pikachu, and it was non-holo for the first time. All of the other copies had been holo, which I really like. I do really like that one. It shows off the background of the card, I think, really nicely as well when there's no holo on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are also ones that I'm still searching for. Oh, wait, I have those.
Yeah, there we go.
So, Dan, I know one of the reasons I wanted to work with you to do this set this week is because I was interested in the concept of the ownership of Pokemon. And, and how prevalent was this? And this was back then, but then did we not see it for a lot of years? And maybe what was the idea behind it? And did it catch on or not catch on? So maybe you can talk about the history of the, these, what I call the ownership of Pokemon cards.
Yep, happy to do that. So obviously in Heroes and Challenge, we saw it for the 8 Kanto Gym Leaders plus Rockets. Team Rocket got some Pokemon as well. I think Rocket's Mewtwo and Rocket's Hitmonchan some of the most famous ones. Then after that, we hit a set which we've sort of talked about quite a lot. Versus set. We've talked about the English versus set a few times on this podcast. The reason we always specify English versus set in Japan was a full 142 card set, while the English set only has 30 cards, of which about half of them are energy. So I think there's only about 17 different cards actually got translated. Japan has a full, complete set like this where all of the Pokemon in it are owners' Pokemon, with the Johto gym leaders and some of the Kanto gym leaders as well. And this was where owners' Pokemon changed slightly, because in this set, even if the Pokemon normally would have been a stage 2 or a stage 1, all of the owners' Pokemon in the set were basic Pokemon, so they didn't have to be evolved into. And it's been speculated, and some people have talked about it a little bit from behind the scenes, that WotC didn't want to release this set in English because they felt that it was a bit overpowered, having all basic Pokemon that had, the abilities or the strengths of fully evolved Pokemon, which is hilarious considering how the TCG's been going since about 2010. But that is one of the reasons we just didn't get the Versus set as a whole in English, and why, it then led to this English Versus set and, other non-Japanese languages being so valuable from these Tropical Mega Battle printings.
Dan, would you be so kind as to pick up something super hard in the room next to you and throw it through your screen to my screen so it can hit me firmly in my temple? And tell me why I cannot understand when you say English versus, what just went wrong in my brain? What is the English versus set? I'm having a brain issue.
What's the English versus set? The Tropical Mega Battle set. It's a 30-card set.
It has Mega Battle set. Okay.
Yeah. It's printed in 2 years because of the Aramantine.
Okay. Yeah, Dan, when you talk there's not, I only know it as the Tropical Mega Battle set. And if you're going to start throwing these other, these aliases at me, I'm not prepared, buddy. You don't see me drinking my coffee. I don't drink coffee. You don't see me drinking my tea. It's too hot for tea. You don't see me drinking my liquor. I don't do liquor anymore either. Dan, throw something and wake me up next time so I know we're talking about Tropical Mega Battle. That's an important set.
Yeah, Tropical Mega Battle is where it was released, but it's also known as English Versus because it was translations of a small selection of cards from Versus set, which, as I say, was a full booster pack release in Japan.
Okay, that's good, Dan. Now we're all caught up. I feel like I don't have to be left behind anymore.
Yeah. So that was the only instance of it in Gen 2 of Owner's Pokemon. So we didn't really get Gen 2 Owner's Pokemon in English. The next one was the set Team Magma versus Team Aqua. And almost all of the Pokemon in that set are either owned by Team Magma or Team Aqua. I will say in Japan, there were a lot more Pokemon in their set which were not owned by Magma or Aqua, but a lot of those cards got pulled towards other sets. Some went as early as Sandstorm, Dragon. I think maybe some got held. At that time, throughout a lot of the EX era, the English and Japanese sets were a lot less tied up in terms of how close their releases were. Japan was releasing sets probably close to a year or two earlier than English still, and the releases weren't exactly one for one. English was just kind of doing its own thing. And the English Magma Aqua set was part of a Japanese set and part of some Japanese fixed decks, which is why it led to... The set looks kind of strange with just a very, very small amount of non-Magma Aqua cards. In Japan, like I say, it was probably closer to 50-50 of whether they were owners or not, but in English, it was maybe about 5% of them were not owners Pokemon. So it does make those Pokemon stand out quite weirdly, I think.
Got it.
The next one we had was Team Rocket Returns, a bit later. We're up to about 2004 at this point. Team Rocket Returns mainly brought back dark Pokemon that were featured in the original Team Rocket and then in Neo Destiny. But it did also include some Rockets Pokemon, mainly the EXs. There were no dark EXs in the sets. They were all Rockets-owned Pokemon, but there were a couple of non-EXs that were Rockets-owned as well. Then, rounding out the EX era, the sets EX Deoxys and EX Unseen Forces each had a secret rare that was another Rockets-owned EX. It was Raikou in Deoxys and Persian in Unseen Forces. These were originally promos in Japan. And again, it just kind of sort of goes to show how the EX era wasn't tallying up perfectly with Japan, because it would have made, so much more sense if they were going to make these in English, either make them promos or at least make them in some way tied to that Team Rocket Return set, but they didn't. They just ended up as secret rares in later sets. And obviously they make them secret rares because it would be weird them just being in the main set, but that was the last we saw of owned Pokemon within the EX era.
Okay.
We then move on to the Platinum era. So, Platinum is kind of its own era. It was a very small amount of sets. It was really the latter half of the Diamond and Pearl era was the Platinum era, but within that we got Owner's Pokemon once again, sort of. These were classified as Pokemon SP. So SP was a type of Pokemon. There were cards that referred directly to SPs. Certain cards would only interact with SP Pokemon. And they were all basic Pokemon, like Versus Set had tried to do. And there are a few different types, but instead of being owned by someone, they had a symbol after their name. So it started off with Gs, which stood for Team Galactic. So they were Pokemon that would be owned by Team Galactic, who was Generation 4's equivalent of Team Rocket. Some of the most famous ones, probably Dialga G, because the Dialga G Level X was a very big deck when it first came out. Crobat G was splashed in basically every deck, because it was, when you played it from your hand, you just put 10 damage anywhere on one of your opponent's Pokemon, but there was also a card which, for free, picked up a Pokemon SP, so you could just immediately replay it. It was teched in a lot of decks. And then later throughout Platinum era, they added different qualifiers, which were all still Pokemon SP variants, but there was GL, which stood for Gym Leader, so it was a Pokemon owned by one of the Generation 4 Gym Leaders. Then there was 4, which was owned by an Elite 4 member, but even outside of Japan, they used the Japanese number 4. So if you're looking at a card, you will see a symbol that you probably don't recognize, but that's the Japanese number 4. They didn't make it the Arabic numeral number 4 for whatever reason. Probably just looked nicer.
Interesting, yeah.
And then they added C, which was, it was either for Champion or for Cynthia. Cynthia was the champion of Generation 4, and these were all Cynthia's Pokemon. Most famous amongst those, probably Garchomp C, worked quite well with Luxray. I think Luxray was a GL. Luxray Level X was in basically every deck after that came out, and then Garchomp Luxray was a huge deck at the time when those were both out. And the final one was Frontier Brain, which was FB. So that was just within the Platinum era. That never left the Platinum era, but all 4 sets had that to some degree.
Never knew. I mean, like, I see that Garchomp C card all the time. Never had an idea what that C stood for. So,
yeah, it's rather than calling it, Cynthia's Garchomp or Champion's Garchomp, there would be an image of Cynthia on the card. The same as with the GL ones, there would be an image of whichever gym leader owned that Pokemon would be on the card somewhere.
Okay.
And then the only time since the Platinum era that we've seen owners Pokemon is Double Crisis, which is the mini set, which we did briefly talk about last week, I think. It was a 32-card set, and they came in, I think, 5-card packs, and it was only sold in blister packs of 4 boosters. That, again, is themed around Team Magma, Team Aqua. This, I think, coincided with the release of, was it Alpha Ruby, Omega Sapphire, or the other way around? Those were the re-releases of the Generation 3 games, so it coincided with that. And the big cards from that set were a Team Magma's Groudon and a Team Aqua's Kyogre. But every Pokemon within that set is owned by either Magma or Aqua.
So Dan, when I was talking about Gym Heroes in the beginning and trying to understand this whole ownership type of concept, what's behind it? Can you sum it up in any way? Is there any way to make any sense out of the fact that it was kind of more prevalent back then, and then from what you've said now has just literally disappeared? What would be the reason that it's disappeared?
So I think back then, all of the different aspects of the Pokemon franchise were tied a lot closer together. So, you know, the anime, the video games, the TCG, I think it was a lot more pitched as one franchise, basically. And there were if people liked Pokemon, they almost certainly liked a bit of everything. So bringing in those characters from the video games, bringing in those characters from the anime into the card game made a lot more sense. Whereas now you will have a lot of people who are just fans of the Pokemon video games or just TCG fans. You know, we're not in that initial nostalgia era where every kid just loves Pokemon no matter what it is. There are different branching off. I mean, I guess you still have, you know, the kids who like everything, but a lot of the older Pokemon fans now have planted their flag in one bit of the franchise, so there's not as much crossover. And in Japan, there is still a little bit more of a crossover between things like anime and the cards. I know, again, back in the EX era, they had a card, Ash's Pokemon. I just realized I missed out. Ash's Greninja was a promo. Ash's Greninja EX was one promo we got over here, I think around the time of Double Crisis again.
Hey, it's Future Dan here, letting you know that I forgot the Ash's Pikachu promos that came out during the I Choose You movie promotions, so there were 7 different versions of Ash's Pikachu. We also got in English.
But Japan has had a lot more of that, and there was a character from one of the movies called Coco, a human character, who actually had a Pokemon card as well. But outside of Japan, it seems to be they're just working a bit more on keeping the franchises a little bit more separate. Or the aspects of the franchise, I should say, sorry.
So my final question then, and that's just so interesting to know all of those things. But do you think, like, I don't know why, and I know it's just dumb. It's just things that first impressions people put in their minds. You know, like, I always think, well, gosh, you know, Charizard is a more valuable card. It's a more desirable card than a Blaine's Charizard. You know, pick a similar card and somebody else owned it and compare the two, regular card, ownership card. Is there any reason why I think that one is more desirable or more valuable? I mean, is it, you know, because Blaine's is just Blaine's, and so we're now owning something that Blaine owns, whereas Charizard is Charizard, and we can all kind of own it ourselves?
No, I think it's just to do with the fact that the regular Charizard, you know, the base set Charizard is an earlier set. It's the first set. You know, if the first Pokemon cards that came out, if Gym Heroes was the first ever set, Blaine's Charizard would be the card of the hobby. It's just that people want the first ever release, so it doesn't matter which Charizard it actually was. That's the one people remember, and that's the thing that people gravitate towards. I don't think it's to do with the fact that, you know, it's Dark Charizard or it's Blaine's Charizard rather than just Charizard. It's because the original one is rarer and has just a much greater appeal, nostalgia-wise, to people that remember it.
But extrapolate away from Charizard to pick anything else. I guess what I'm saying is, psychologically, I just feel like a card with no owner is more desirable than a card with an owner's name.
I mean, that might be true for a lot of people, I guess. It probably also does depend on, like I say, how much a person knows that character. You know, there might be, if someone is a huge fan of the video games or the anime and really, really loves Blaine as a character, that person probably would want Blaine's Charizard more than they would just want Charizard because they love Blaine or they love Misty or they love Brock, whoever it is. So that, in that case, it probably does come down to the individual person and where their fandom level lies with the characters who actually own the Pokemon.
Okay. All right. Good. A very interesting and a detailed and historical discussion of ownership of Pokemon. That's really good, Dan. Thank you.
And if I missed any, Laura will point it out in the comments. I'm just glad I remembered the Ash's Greninja at the last minute.
Right. And speaking of Laura pointing things out, you know, for those of you that subscribe to Dan's Patreon, you would understand that that we had a little snafu in one of our early podcasts, and that had to do with me making up a story using some characters and not understanding their ages and how they might all fit together. And so Laura, she basically threw up emoji'd me a new one, threw up emoji, get it? Me a new one, yeah. Ripped me and tore me a new one. So I had to go back to the drawing board. And with all that in mind, I'd like to take a moment, Dan. Can I move on now?
Yeah, is this your rant, or are you doing a weird story that was
I'm gonna do
somehow
a story.
All right, do a story, and then we'll do your rant. Go on. Then.
Okay, so the thing is, with Laura in mind behind the scenes and knowing that she was going to correct Dan, but I didn't want her correcting me, I thought I'd let you guys know the behind the scenes, never before revealed story behind the characters in the Gym Heroes set. So I think you'll find this interesting. At the time the set was issued, Blaine was in the midst of experiencing the full effects of Misty's wrath. While no one really knew exactly what was going on, it was rumored that Blaine just didn't value the opinion of a 10-year-old who he considered a wannabe trainer at best. Anyway, not knowing exactly what to do to turn the situation around, and as a last resort, Blaine asked Brock for his training method in how he had dealt successfully with previous trainer interactions and difficulties. No one can confirm exactly what Brock told Blaine, but with this newly gained knowledge, Blaine took the ultimate gamble and embarked on a secret mission to reverse he and Misty's negative energy flow. And it wasn't easy. He visited 3 gyms, Celadon City, Cerulean, and Pewter City, before realizing only the Vermilion gym held the secrets he needed to master. But even that wasn't easy, as he was almost thrown out for trying to access the off-limit corridors of the Narrow gym. Luckily, Vermilion was a no-removal gym, and Blaine was provided additional opportunities to get back on track. It was later confirmed that Brock's advice to Blaine was based on his previous experiences with Erica. So let me take a step back and let you know a little bit more about Erica. Erica was definitely a bit oddish. Essentially, she lived her life as if she was a celebrity, although she never really had the financial means or resources to do so. She was constantly pampered by her maids and smelled of a distinct perfume which she applied all too liberally every chance she could. Everyone expected her to display good manners, but it just wasn't in her DNA. Behind the scenes, those who knew her were well aware that her act could not go on for too long. But Brock never seemed to catch on to this reality. And Blaine was, of course, trying to solicit Brock's advice when dealing with Misty, possibly a recipe for disaster. Well, luckily, there was one more person watching this whole entire craziness play out, and that was Sabrina. Sabrina knew that Brock's advice was never going to work, and that Blaine would never be happy with Misty's youthful thinking or actions, no matter what his secret mission revealed. Sabrina also knew she would be a much better training partner for Blaine than Misty. And moreover, Sabrina didn't have to embark on any secret mission because she already possessed a distinct superpower. So she set up a meeting with Blaine where she gazed inside his heart and soul and used her ESP to create a plan to rid Blaine of Misty's defiance forever. Sabrina learned what was really important to Blaine in continuing to be the amazing trainer he had always been, and she spoke to him in a way that he felt heard and validated. And as time went on, rumor has it that despite their significant age difference, it seems their partnership grew to be more than just trainers. In fact, Sabrina went so far as to ensure that every night they would enjoy their tickling machine, which meant they would always go to bed with smiles on their faces. From that day forward, Blaine, Sabrina, and all their Pokemon friends lived happily ever after. The end. And that's my story of what was really going on, Dan, behind the scenes. I want to let everybody know that if they were to open their Gym Heroes set and look back at all the cards, they might find some of that interesting in how the terms and things were used. And I think this is actually a very good exercise you can do with your children someday, is to put them in front of a Pokemon set, let them enjoy the cards, and then say, hey, why don't you tell me a story about these characters and use some of their battle attacks and words on the cards. But I enjoyed really understanding the behind the scenes situation because people don't talk of it often, and I think they should much more. Mm-hmm.
And I just want everyone to know that if this podcast is delayed until Wednesday, it was editing. That is the reason. Because I didn't even listen to half of that, but that sounded like it had 100 card images in it. You ready to do your rant?
I have a rant right now.
If you're ready.
Sure, let's do a rant.
Oh, good. David has a rant coming on.
All right, it's that time again. You have your rant ready?
Sure, Dan. It's not that hard for me to put a rant together, Dan. It really is just
well,
my life.
You seem to enjoy doing it, and As I always say, I have to hear it a few times in editing, so I'm going to go make a tea. Do your end. I'll see you in like 5 minutes.
Okay, not surprising, Dan. Get out. It's funny that Dan's leaving now to make a cup of tea. Not surprising. The guy's, he thinks friendship is something where you just use somebody to get what you need, and you don't hang around for the tough times. So, and I guess maybe that leads into today's rant, which is title, does it even matter? Does it even matter? The journey, the process, the time, the effort, the experiences along the way. The lovers lost, the friendships won. Heck, for some of you, even your jail time. Does any of it really matter? You set a goal, you achieve it. You set another goal, you don't achieve it. You look back at the goals, you try to set some more goals. You're not even sure if you're going to set goals anymore. And you don't know what you're going to come up with when it's all done, right? You think it's a way of measuring things. Do you care? Does your best friend care? Do your parents care? Your children care? Does anybody really care? What about you go to the grocery store, you're walking down an aisle, you're picking out some corn, right? You got 100 cans of corn there, right? You got yellow corn and you got hominy, which is like a white corn. You got some maize or something. Do you care which kind of corn you come home with? I don't care. Should I care? I don't care about any of it. It's your life. Do whatever you want. What about going to a movie theater? You pick the rom-com, you pick the drama, the thriller. Okay, enjoy, have a good time. And when it's over, it's done. Does anybody really care? All right. Even if every time you open your mouth, you're right or wrong, you're going to be right or wrong, right? Does anybody care? You don't know if it matters. Does it matter if I know if it matters? Does it matter if the world knows if it matters? Politically, you might think it matters, but does it? Because you know what? It'll just change 4 years later. I don't think it matters. But if you're, of course, religious or political, you do think everything matters, and that's a whole nother issue. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, when you consider the aspects of your life and you try to figure out what direction you're going, what the goals are, what it's going to end up looking like, what your legacy is going to be, what your collection is going to have in it, what car you drive, do you have enough money, do you have toilet paper when you go to the bathroom? A lot of you think it matters, all right? Once there was cloth diapers too, okay? So don't challenge me because you think, oh, I don't know. And with respect to this whole thing about showing people attention. How about the TikToks and the social media and the Instagrams and stuff? I can't even get Dan to sit down through my rants. I'm really fed up with it, honestly. I put so much time and effort in these podcasts and nobody watches. Does it matter? I think it matters. And then I don't think it matters because I don't even think I'm allowed to not think it matters. Because if it doesn't matter to anybody, why should it matter to me? And if it matters to me, why should it not matter to anybody else? That's the whole thing. Nothing matters. Could Dan have done this podcast without going for a stinking cup of tea right now? Yeah. But to him, he needed a cup of tea, okay? To him, what Laura thinks matters. And for him, it very much well might be that way. But in a large scheme of things, guys, nothing really matters. And when you figure that out, when you figure out that something just went wrong in your life, you walked in the room and it didn't seem out the way it was supposed to play out. If you had not walked in that room, it would have never even happened. So why does it matter? Take yourself, walk backwards 4 steps, and you'll find out from the get-go, had you never walked in the room, it wouldn't have happened. So it doesn't matter that it did happen, because if it hadn't happened, it wouldn't have happened, and it wouldn't matter at all, right? And that's all I have to say about that. I guess we could just sit here now on the podcast. There's no reason not to. Let's just talk without Dan here. So what do you guys think? Do you think that it's worth me keeping Dan on this whole thing with me? I mean, he doesn't have the same personality, and that's probably a good thing. He's probably not as crazy as me. That's definitely a good thing. He's got a better relationship with his wife than I do with mine, which is a sensational thing. It's much better at the technological aspects of putting this all together. I can't talk much longer. He's going to come back. But does he give enough to the podcast? I mean, do you guys want to let me know? You can DM me at dperson1 and tell me, David, keep going, but get Dan off. Like, that's a comment that doesn't matter, but I'd act like it did. And when you send it to me, I want you to believe it does matter. Sure. I want you to want to send it. And that you're even watching. You know what I've been worrying about? I guess I'll go back in my rant. I've been worrying that people aren't watching the podcast. Oh my goodness, we get so much, But at the end of the day, why do I care? I'm having fun. You're having fun. Dan's having fun. Dan gets a few watch hours. And isn't that all that matters in a world where nothing matters? Dan, good to see you back, buddy. Did you get a cup of tea?
Hey, you done with your rant, or you still mid-rant?
No, I'm done, Dan. I just want to know what kind of flavored tea you got. I didn't say anything about you during my rant. Nothing.
It's tea-flavored tea.
Okay, that's good, Dan. Good. Yeah, I'm done with my rant, Dan. Thanks for stopping back in.
All right, great.
What cards have our hosts found today?
All right, into the Look What I Found section, the section where we each just grab a card from our respective collections and decide to talk about it. This week, I'm picking Flaaffy. You'll see it a bit better on screen. This is a Black Star promo from the Scarlet and Violet era. Black Star promo number 15. This one is kind of a cool little one. This one is one that isn't advertised, in the way that most promo cards are. If you see promo products, you normally expect to see some sort of box, and it'll have a promo card on the front, and the focus of the box is the promo. Well, with this Flaaffy, this was inside a deck. There was an Ampharos EX deck. The Ampharos EX itself was also a Black Star promo, and the deck was focused around that Ampharos, but inside the deck, there were 2 copies of this other new, totally exclusive Black Star promo Flaaffy. And I just like this Flaaffy. I think it's a nice little one that just appears inside another product. When I opened it, I wasn't expecting to get it in there because I tried to avoid the set list before I did my video. So that's why I picked Flaaffy this week. And I like to get mine out of the way quick because I know that David is going to just ramble on for a bit with his pick.
Dan, was yours, does it have is it sealed or was it just open in the deck?
No, it's open in the deck. When you open the decks, the main face card is like in plastic at the front, and then there's just a deck box that holds the other 59 cards of the deck. So then it's in there.
That's a very cool story. And I know, Dan, not to put an extra plug in there, but if you guys watch some of Dan's videos on his channel, not just these podcasts, you'll get to see him open all of this wonderful merchandise that he buys from his local hobby store because he likes to help them with their sales goals. And he goes and opens these things up, and you get to see all this. And then you can decide after I watch him open stuff, I'll call him up and go, Dan, just want to clarify that there are variants in this box. He goes, yeah. And then I go down to my local hobby store. We don't have one. So I just go online and I buy it from somewhere so I can then open it and get my variants. So yeah, Dan, good education, good story. Thank you for the Flaaffy exercise. Can I go?
You can go.
All right, Dan, I do want you to remember that this segment is not just about look what I found in cards, because when you guys are doing this now, I understand this is becoming one of America's greatest, most enjoyable home games now, where families sit around with their Pokemon cards, families and friends, and they pull out a card and they describe the circumstance behind looking at it and selecting it and talk to their friends about it. So this is not necessarily about just selecting the card. This is staying in contact with your collection. And we want all of you to be doing that at least once a week. And if you're not doing that, Craig Holmes, then get on it. So as an example of why I think it's important to stay in contact with your collection, is I was looking for my card this week, and I think it was inside the Chilling Reign binder when I realized that, by the way, that was not a set I bought from my normal set lady. And so there you go, things happen. And so I looked through and I'm going 216, 217, 216, 219. What? So of course there was 2 216s and no 218. And by going through my collection, I realized that, and now I have a card to search for. By the way, anybody has a 218 they want to trade for a 216 in the Chilling Reign set, let me know. So this week, in doing that, maintaining contact with my collection, because I'm trying to do that more often, I deserve it. My collection deserves at least that for me. The card I chose was Sylveon V, 183 of 203 from Evolving Skies. I know that'll be on your screen because my good partner and friend Dan Norton will put it up there. Now, the reason I chose this card, of course, is because I actually do care about the stories behind the card. Dan says he does, and says he only collects the cards that have a good story about him, hence the Flaaffy. Although I didn't think it was a story about the Flaaffy. It was just like a story about opening a box and finding a hidden gem inside. But I chose this card because of the attack words. And this is my question for the rest of you as you look at the card on your screen. Do you get to earn a dream gift by hitting a magical shot? Or does the dream gift come by doing the work, which then often injects a little magic in your life? Well, here's what happened to me this week, and Dan knows because he's intricately involved in pretty much everything I do, sometimes too much. I'm very uncomfortable with it as well. But we've gotten used to each other because we have to, and that's just what co-hosts do. I randomly jumped on eBay, put in a search for an older card I still needed, and unbelievably came across the card. I immediately worked with Dan to contact the seller, only to find out that just virtually at the same exact time, he was about to sell the card to another buyer who was also in hot pursuit to try and complete the same master set that I'm working on. Within 24 hours, thanks to Dan's amazing efforts and my money, we obtained the card and hence kept my dream alive to complete the most difficult master set of all of them, period. So my moral here is I believe that the harder you work, the luckier you get. And I've got another story about this that I'll tell in a video to come later. But here's my message. Stay active with your searches. Stay involved in looking at eBay. Pursue, pursue, pursue. Don't put it down, because if you stay on it, you're going to find what you need. I've got more examples of this coming up. And spend time really refining your searches as well. I think that's really important. Note when it comes to searches, start large. Start large with the two symbols, like Charizard Holo, but then obviously Charizard Holo base set. And then you start raining down into all of the different, gyrations of what it could be. But this way you don't miss anything if people have listed things, not putting the exact terms you thought that they should be on there. And I want to say one other thing. Please comment on this. I watched a video, and it might have been, I don't know if we talked about Rafi in another video, a podcast a week or two ago. It might have been he and Jake doing their video that I got to watch them do something that I happened to look at and understand and have employed since. And it was brand new for me, and I've used it to a huge extent later. Do you guys put minuses in your eBay searches? Because I think that a lot of people don't realize that might be one of the few sites you can actually put a minus in, so you can search for something and say minus Japanese, and you'll eliminate all of those results. I guess maybe I'm the only one that thinks he knows that and everybody else knows that. But if you didn't know that, just shoot me something and say, hey, thanks, Dave. I didn't know that. That was good to know. All right. And that's why I selected that card. Dan, I know you know that. Do you think a lot of people know about minus searches and eBay search things?
I think it used to be pretty well known, but I think with the new huge influx of collectors over the past couple of years, it's maybe knowledge that didn't get passed on. I think it's something that people don't talk about enough, because it's one of the things that the people who do it kind of assume everyone knows it. So I think it's probably not talked about enough that people know you can eliminate a certain word from a search term. To give an example, I use it mainly for the card game Wars, which we talked about when we were talking about Rafi, because it was the box of Wars he sent me. Because the company that made Wars, they made it as a reboot of their Star Wars game when they lost the license to Star Wars. But the Star Wars game lasted for so much longer and was so much more popular. So if you put in, it was a company called Decipher, if you put in Decipher Wars TCG onto eBay, you're just getting pages of Star Wars. So you have to put that minus star in order to be able to find any sort of Wars TCG stuff. That's where I actually mainly use it.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most critical things I use to get to things when I really want to do intricacy and do several layers and bring things down to the smallest level to make sure that I haven't missed anything or that I can find something, especially with save searches, so I don't get, hundreds of things coming to me every day.
Yeah. Well, there you go. If you learned one thing from this podcast, it's the minus on eBay, if you didn't already know it.
Good.
Any Pokemon in the news lately?
All right, just a couple of interesting news items this week. First of all, a new pair of EX Battle decks have been announced, Greninja and Kangaskhan. These are actually the same type of deck that Flaffy that I just mentioned came in, and we've had a couple of different variants of it so far. And other thing to mention, the Yokohama Open has been cancelled. For people who don't know what the Yokohama Open is, that would have been a tournament that was ran at the World Championships. It would have been ran during day 2, and it would have allowed, anyone who went to Worlds without an invite, if they got a spectator badge, they could have attempted to buy a ticket to play in it, or players who were eliminated from Worlds after day 1, if they didn't get the required amount of points to make day 2, they could have tried to play in this to start earning points for next year's Worlds qualification. But similar to the deck box that we mentioned last week, we've just been told that it was cancelled. They haven't really given any sort of details or anything on it. I think a lot of people are getting pretty annoyed at certain things over this World Championships, over the fact that, a lot of people would have bought flights and hotels, potentially non-refundable, either for the Open or for the fact that they were hoping to go to Worlds before it was announced that it was a lottery system. I think there's hopefully a lot of things that Pokemon learned from this World about organizing some of this stuff going forward, because it's felt like communication has been really, really lacking. I mean, I think we say that a lot about Pokemon, that communication is lacking quite a bit at times, but it did feel like a lot of this stuff needed to be announced earlier. I know there's always going to be some genuine unforeseen circumstances, but a couple of things like this, and especially the lottery system for Worlds, they knew it was going to be that way. They must have known it was going to be that way, you know, since they started organizing it. It feels like there should have been more information given before people had the chance to book these flights. You know, the announcement of a lottery system should have happened on the day they announced the dates and venue, so that people knew exactly what they were getting themselves in for.
Dan, we've talked a little bit in the past about how the players of the game are the ultimate, you know, arbiters of popularity of the game going forward. And so my question is, with all the stuff, the new stuff that comes out, and the players looking for what they need to play, where does 151 fit into all of this? I mean, the fact that they're vintage cards, I'm presuming, and maybe I'm completely wrong, that there's no way you'd ever be able to put any of these cards into the decks of today. So if that is indeed the case, then one could argue that there's definitely things that Pokemon comes out with that are not necessarily player-based, but they're also collector-based. Am I right or wrong in that thinking?
So you're sort of wrong in thinking that they're vintage cards. They're vintage Pokemon, you know, they're the original 151 Pokemon from Kanto, but all of these cards will be standard legal. You will be able to put them in your decks. You know, some of them are going to be EX cards and stuff that weren't around back then. And it's not like they're going to be only as powerful as the Pokemon from base set. They're going to be at the power level of cards from today. I will say, I do believe it is kind of a collector-focused set. They do sets like that sometimes with Shining Fates and stuff. But it's when we talk about special sets, you know, there's 4 main sets per year, and then each year has 1 or 2 special sets, which is where, you know, Crown Zenith fell in, Shining Fates fell in, 151 falls into it as well. If you're looking at like the product codes, then, you know, Scarlet Violet was SVP 1, Paldea was 2, Obsidian Flames is 3, 151 is 3.5, and then this next main set after that is 4. So these special sets, the 0.5 sets, there can be a lot more collector focus rather than just being player focused. You know, they work for players as well, especially things like, you know, the Galarian Gallery in Crown Zenith that we've talked about. That has a lot of these nice alternate arts of some quite playable cards that players will want for their decks. But when I've talked about the players and stuff going forward, we're at a point where Pokemon has enough of an established player base that they can take a little bit of time to give some stuff to the collectors, which I don't think newer games should be doing that. I've normally talked about player bases being the driving force a lot in terms of brand new games. I think when you're starting out a brand new game, you have to go to those players. You ignore the collectors for now. Pokemon has the longevity where they can afford to aim some sets at collectors, but, you know, if they did every set a year that was only aimed at collectors and players didn't really want any of it, then that's when they're going to be in trouble. I think 151 is going to be is one of those nice middle grounds where collectors are going to be after it because of what it represents, but players can still go for it. You know, if there's a nice card in it that works well in decks, great. Or if one of these nice alternate arts is a version of a card that's already good. I'm not sure if there's some reprints in it. I think maybe trainer-wise there's some reprints in it. But then players will be after that to, you know, upgrade their decks. So that's where it falls. It is still a playable set. You can still take the cards from 151, put them in your deck, and go to a local tournament. It's not like it's tournament exempt.
Okay. Did not know that. Interesting. Good to know.
The only ones they've ever released anytime recently, which were tournament exempt, was within Celebrations. You know, they had the 25 card numbered set, and then they had the 25 card classic collection. The classic collection was not allowed in tournaments, and a couple of the promos that came out with it were not allowed in tournaments. But even the main 25 cards from Celebrations were still allowed in tournaments.
Why were the cards that were not allowed not allowed?
Well, it's because they were direct reprints of older cards, so they didn't really fit into the format too well. Some of them would have been too good, some would have been basically unplayable. So they were, and they had their, you know, original set symbols and stuff on them. It wasn't like they had a classic collection set symbol on. So like the Tapu Lele GX still had the Guardians Rising set logo on it. So it would have made it quite confusing for people as well if suddenly base set Blastoise, any printing of that was now allowed in standard, and if Tapu Lele GX was back in standard. It just made it so they could reprint what they thought were the most iconic cards without having to worry about how they would affect the standard environment. Because if they had been worried about how it would affect standard, Tapu Lele probably wouldn't have made the cut. Quite possibly the Reshiram from Black and White, which was a very powerful card in its time. They would have had to work around a lot of different things to make them fit into standard, and it was better for everyone if they didn't.
Got it. Okay.
So that was all of the news, everything that's been kind of going on at the moment. Do you have anything else to go into before we start our wrap-up and your Ferris Bueller games?
No, I just want to say to everybody, especially to those of you who continue to watch us week after week, I love you all very much, even if I'm not in love with you all. But if you were to convince one other person to actually watch us week after week with you, then I would be in love with all of you as well.
Yeah, so that is David's way of saying that the main part of the podcast is over. There will be a game coming, but if you're just here for the Pokemon, this is it for you. Be sure to check us out on all of the social medias. On Twitter, we are Coffee Talks Poke. On Instagram, we are Coffee Talks Pokemon. Instagram really is where most of our stuff goes. TikTok, where Coffee Talks Pokemon. The TikTok will be active at some point, I promise. And if you're listening to an audio-only version of this, you can catch the full video version at youtube.com/DJ Gigabyte. And David, take your Ferris Bueller away.
Finally, let's play a game before we go.
Yeah, listen, if you're still here, there's no reason to be, unless you want to hear some more, because there's more coming. But I'm not saying you should stay here, because you guys probably have busy lives and busy things to do. And, school's starting in a matter of weeks now. Some of you should probably go back to school if you've all wrapped up in your collections and forgot everything you learned. But at this point in our podcast, for those of you that choose to stay, and I don't know why, we're going to do our Ferris Bueller's Day Off, end of the podcast segment, where we wonder why you're still here, but you want to be. So we'll just continue to do one more segment for you. Thank you. Are you ready, Dan? Today we're going to play a game. I know it's one of your very most favorites, Dan. It's called 3 Questions. We played it last week, and you did so marvelously that I figured that, I had the Instagram feedback I had to my DMs, people jumping in, was unbelievable. And I was so pleased from the reactions to how much you struggled with it that I thought we should really do it again. Okay, Dan, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, Dan. Question number 1. Dan, do your parents watch your videos?
No, God, no. I don't think anyone in my family watches any of my videos.
Dan, do you ask your parents to watch your videos?
No, because I just know they wouldn't understand them.
So Dan, not even like I don't want to compare, and I would think that, okay, we all have our relationship issues with our parents and stuff, but wouldn't they even watch for the hours thing? Like you and I aren't even that close, Dan. I've never really been a big fan of yours. I've just tolerated you through the years. And yet my mom watches this, and she knows nothing about Pokemon. My mom's 87 years old. She's basically on her way out. And even as she sits in a hospital and somebody's taking bed sores off her back, she's watching me because I'm her son. And she thinks that occasionally I'll say something intricate or humorous or stupid. And she watches me because she knows it helps pay a bill so you and Laura can put the lights on every once in a while and cook on your heated gas stove. So why would you not see if your parents want to watch, maybe even a segment or two, maybe indoctrinate them? Shouldn't they be helping you as through your life as you're still their son, Dan?
Maybe I'll tell them to. I think some of Laura's family occasionally watches some of the videos. But yeah, I guess I'll tell. When I go back over in October and I see my family, I'll sit them all down and make them watch stuff.
You have them watch one video. I mean, I'd be proud of you as a parent. I'm not proud of you as a friend, but I'd be proud of you as what you're doing here and how much you know and kind of the expertise you exhibit. So yeah, Dan, I think it'd be fun to pin them down, make them watch and say, look, my analytics will tell me whether or not from this day forward you've ever watched another one of my videos. Yeah. And they don't know that because they're old, they don't understand. And so you just make them watch, tell them if they're watching, and then hopefully they'll keep watching and get you another hour and a half per week. Okay, bud?
Hopefully. I also should mention before she yells at me, it's Laura's job at Nationwide that pays our bills. These videos do not pay our bills.
No, and I understand that, Dan, but I'm trying to make the difference between
Yeah.
a can of beans and maybe a can of macaroni and cheese. Let me just think about that. Macaroni and cheese comes in a box.
Yeah.
Dan, I'd like to make a difference between a can of beans and a can of hominy since I referenced corn earlier today.
Sure.
Hominy is very good, guys. I don't like corn very much, but I really do like hominy. Try it out sometime. You just stick it in a bowl, stick it in the microwave. It comes out nice.
Yeah. I just don't want to be yelled at for pretending that I contribute to this household in any meaningful way.
Okay. And we know. I think the only thing you do is maybe take care of the dogs every once in a while.
Yeah.
Dan, you said, I love your honesty, Dan, and thank you, Laura, and thank you, Laura's family, who's actually watching for watching. Yeah. Oh my goodness, this is really unbelievable. Right now, I might have to start an into the podcast rant. Dan, you said in the question number 2, Dan, stick in.
There you go.
You said in a previous episode, Dan, that a stopped clock was right twice a day. Dan, why did you say that?
Why did I mean, it's an expression. You were talking about how you said you got something right in the podcast, and you mentioned that it happens occasionally, and it's just an expression. It's a thing people say when you say you're not right very often. It's just to talk about how if you say enough stuff, eventually something's going to be right. And a stopped clock is right twice a day, because if your clock stops at 10 o'clock, and it always says 10 o'clock, twice during the day, it's going to be 10 o'clock. I didn't come up with the expression. It's just an expression.
Dan, I hear what you're saying, and I love the fact that you're going to justify anything you say because apparently you're an expert in everything. But
apparently,
my question, Dan, philosophically, is it even logically possible that something which by definition is broken or not working can ever be correct at all?
Yes.
You can't just yes me.
I can.
No.
Hey, Laura is the one with the...
It's not even working. It doesn't work. It's broken. How can something that's broken... If you and Laura's relationship is broken, is it working?
No, but it can still be right. I didn't say that the clock was working
be right.
twice
a day. Relationship can't be right if it's wrong. It's broken.
But a broken clock will still display the correct time twice a day. It doesn't mean it's working. It means that if you happen to look at it at exactly that right moment, then it's displaying the correct time. Which means that it's no fault of the clocks that it's doing anything right. The clock is still broken. The clock has no effect over whether it's right or not. And that ties very nicely in to when you just talk a lot and occasionally get something right. You have no influence over whether you get something right, just purely on odds. If you keep saying things about Pokemon, sometimes they'll be correct.
But Dan, I don't have any influence over anything. So, I mean, when you say my ability to influence right or wrong doesn't matter at all, you can't even connect me to any of this. I'm trying to connect you to the fact that your argument is completely illogical. And what you're doing is you're riding on pure chance. But this isn't about pure chance, okay? It's not about, you're saying if I say enough, I'm going to be pure chance, I'm going to be right. No, I'm not going to be right. I'll probably be wrong 100 out of 100 times, unless you choose to assume I'm right because you want to give me the benefit of the expectation of the doubt, because you can't figure out if I was never going to be right if you never gave me the benefit of the doubt.
Laura, you have a philosophy degree. You deal with this in the comments.
Okay, and make sure I know which philosopher you're basing on when you select your answer, Laura, as well. Because I definitely like there's so many different philosophical ideologies. So I definitely want to know what yours is based on. All right, Dan, number 3 and final, which is really so good for you, so you can wrap up and start editing. What do you and Laura fight or argue about in the Pokemon world, other than who's got a better collection or which rides you'll be going on during your World's Disney trip?
For Pokemon, I don't actually think we argue too much. I think the big disagreement we have is quality versus quantity in terms of collection, where I would rather get one card that I'm missing in very good condition, whereas Laura would rather get 10 that she's missing in worse condition. But it's never been an argument over that. We just collect separately in our different ways. Pokemon is one of the few things that we both pretty much agree on. Unless you count, I think she spends too much money and she thinks I spend too much money, when in reality we're just both spending way too much money.
And Dan, you would never argue about who gets ownership of the next Pokemon card that neither one of you have yet, owned, because you'd always defer to her just to try to keep the relationship alive, correct?
Well, so we worked it out nicely. For Sun and Moon era, she got the first copy, I got the second copy. Sword and Shield era, I got the first copy, she got the second. And then Scarlet Violet, we switched it back, so she gets the first, and I get the second. The only difference in that is if it's like a staff promo or a professor promo that neither of us had, and Laura actually earned it herself, even if I didn't have it and it was one of my eras that I should have been getting it first, then she would always get that one first if she actually earned the card.
Are you in a community property state, Dan? Is Ohio a community property state?
I have no idea.
Okay, you might want to look that up because I don't really care if she earned it or not. If it's community property state, you both earned it. And you know what? You're both supporting each other in these goals and dreams. And it doesn't work that way. I might earn more money than my wife, but believe me, she thinks she's entitled to much more of what I earn than I am. And she's 100% right. I'm not going to argue with her on that because she watches these podcasts occasionally.
Yeah.
So Dan, I hear everything you're saying. I don't like any of it. But I will say I'd like to ask you one last thing. There's never a card that you might come across because you just have, in fact, I know what it is. Okay, great. Here we go. So I once heard a small, tiny little bird say that your favorite Pokemon ever in the history of mankind was Vaporeon. Would you say that's still true?
Yeah.
Okay. And it fits you because of, Vaporeon looks a lot like you. So Vaporeon, Dan, you come across a Vaporeon promo and it's your versus Laura, but it's her turn to get it. But you think you might not see this one for a while to come. Could you ever get down and just go into that little baby talk begging mode of yours and say, Laura, please, Laura, this is one time I make a switch for the Vaporeon.
That's horrifying. But if it was something like that, we could work it out. But in general, she has a lot of that stuff already that I was picking up. I guess for older stuff like WotC era stuff and EX era stuff, it's very much on just we each pick what we want to get, and I buy stuff that I want that she doesn't have, and the other way around. It's just for the newer sets where we're both actively chasing them as they come out, we have the agreement in place of who gets what first.
All right. Well, I do encourage you to put the agreement in writing because if it does break off one day due to bad baby talk, bad communication, or bad friendship, you're going to need something that shows that there actually was some kind of documentation. Otherwise, I can tell you, making no money and just sitting around doing only the dogs, you're going to be mightily in a bad way. I could have said a bad word. I didn't want to. So mightily in a bad way. You're going to find yourself in a bad way quite mightily. Dan, I'm done talking. I'm even tired of listening to myself today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. It's Sunday, and I've got a lot to do, nothing else. And Dan, thank you for taking the time on the podcast to do all that you do. Like I said in the beginning, I mean it. You're doing great work. Laura, you too. And you know what? You've got him right where you want him. Dan, what else would you like to say before we say goodbye?
I think that's it. I think we're done for this week. Remember, even though there's no giveaway, there's no reason to not just slide into David's DMs and send him random messages. Even just send him random numbers. See what happens. It'll be funny.
If you slide into my DMs at any time, believe me, it makes me feel closer to you. My friendships are the ones that are very shallow. The more shallow, the better. Please jump in because once I have those, then I send gifts anyways. I don't have to wait for a stupid giveaway. Okay?
Yeah. And you can message me if you want, or you can message the Coffee Talks Instagram. That goes to me as well. But hey, hopefully you all have just a great week. Join us again next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Coffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Persin, featuring music by More Than Never and artwork by Laura Norton. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to have a